It's 7 p.m. Wednesday, September 25th, here in Seoul.
Coming up on News Center tonight. President Moon Jae-in addresses the United Nations, proposing to turn the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas into a global peace zone. Seoul's Unification Ministry is drawing up a comprehensive plan to make the president's ambitious proposal a reality.
Business leaders from South Korea and Japan call on their respective governments to resolve their escalating trade war. In a joint statement, the business leaders urge Seoul and Tokyo to engage in dialogue and normalize relations.
Concerns rise over the spread of African swine fever in South Korea as 3 more suspected cases are reported on Ganghwa Island, Incheon, a day after the 5th case was confirmed in the same area.
And U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announces a formal impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump, accusing him of enlisting a foreign power to help him win the 2020 elections. News Center begins now.
Good evening to our viewers in Asia and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Arirang News Center. I'm Han-daeun in Seoul.
And I'm Noah. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. We begin with President Moon Jae-in's keynote speech to the UN. Sending a message of peace to the world, he unveiled his ambitious goal of turning the heavily fortified DMZ into an international peace zone.
He also laid out 3 core principles for resolving the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula. Our Shin Se-min files this report from New York.
Turning the thin strip of land, a place that is dotted with some 380,000 landmines, into an area of peace and reconciliation with the help of the international community. President Moon Jae-in, standing before the delegations gathered at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, proposed remodeling the demilitarized zone into an international peace zone.
비무장 지대 안에 남북의 규제 중인 유엔기구와 평화, 생태, 문화와 관련한 기구 등이 자리 잡아 평화 연구, 평화 유지, 군비 통제, 신뢰 구축 활동의 중심지가 된다면 명실공히 국제적인 평화지대가 될 수 있을 것입니다.
The South Korean leader even hinted at designating the DMZ as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Such proposals are an extension to the promise already made by President Moon and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during their summit in April last year. Stressing it'll take South Korean troops alone 15 years to remove anti-personnel mines from the DMZ, President Moon called for international support and for other countries to be more accommodating to the North if it takes steps worthy of reward.
북한이 진정성을 가지고 비핵화를 실천해 나간다면 국제사회도 이에 상응하는 모습을 보여주어야 합니다.
President Moon also revisited the 3 essential principles that he sees as the keys to lasting peace. 1. Zero tolerance for war. 2. A mutual security guarantee. And 3. Co-prosperity. And he stressed that his administration is in favor of offering Pyongyang the security guarantees it so desperately seeks.
서로의 안전이 보장될 때 한반도 비핵화와 평화 체제를 빠르게 구축할 수 있습니다.
By bringing in the international community into Korean Peace Process Action Plan, the president is hoping to assure North Korea of its security guarantees and perhaps give a much-needed boost to the Korea's denuclearization drive. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, New York.
Seoul's Unification Ministry is swiftly taking actions to realize President Moon's vision of global peace zone. It says it is now devising a comprehensive plan to turn the president's proposal into reality. Arirang's Oh Jung-hee tells us more.
Efforts are underway within the South Korean government to realize President Moon Jae-in's idea of making peaceful use of the inter-Korean demilitarized zone. Seoul's Unification Ministry said at its regular press briefing on Wednesday.
The Ministry of Unification is currently leading efforts to review and devise a comprehensive plan to peacefully use the DMZ. We will be working with related experts and government ministries.
Speaking at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, President Moon proposed turning the demilitarized zone into a peace zone. He laid out specific action plans, like listing the DMZ as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, designating a, quote, peace cooperation district between the border village of Panmunjom and North Korean city of Kaesong, stationing UN agencies within the DMZ, and working with the UN to remove landmines from the area. If international institutions were brought into the zone, that would help further lower military tensions along the inter-Korean border. However, these goals are more long-term than short-term because the DMZ is shared with the North and the Seoul government is not yet sure on how it'll work with Pyongyang.
There will be some things we could do in a short period of time, but also those aspects that will have to be carried out in the mid to long term. It's too early for us to tell you our specific plans to discuss with the North.
The idea of transforming the DMZ into a peace zone was floated when President Moon and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met for the first time in April last year. It was once again brought up in September when the two Koreas signed a comprehensive military agreement to lower tensions at the DMZ. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
With President Moon's speech dominating the headlines, much attention is also being drawn to the environmental aspect of the demilitarized zone, an area that has been intact from human touch for 7 decades. Our Choi Jung-yoon has more on the ecological value of the DMZ and ways to preserve it.
While the demilitarized zone has served as a buffer between South and North Korea following the Korean War in 1953, environmentalists say that this is one of the few places on Earth untouched by recent human development, and that it can be gifted to future generations. Some experts claim that the international community, through bodies such as UNESCO, should co-govern the DMZ alongside the two Koreas.
It seems quite logical to work with the mechanisms of UNESCO in Paris to set up perhaps a loose working group of people from both sides, North and South Korea, or international support group, to consider possibilities of advancing the demilitarized zone to a peace and life zone.
He added that the DMZ can become a global symbol of Earth trusteeship, the idea that nature exists for itself and cannot be owned by a single person or country. Efforts have been taken in the South to better promote the symbol of peace and ecosystem of the DMZ internationally, creating the so-called Peace Trail and listing southern half of the DMZ as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. However, experts say these efforts must be done in cooperation with the North. At a 4-day DMZ fair held earlier last week in the city of Goyang in Gyeonggi-do Province, experts and citizens gathered to share the DMZ's ecological values.
It is important to reach a consensus with the North on proceeding with the registration of the DMZ as a piece of world heritage. While waiting for the North answer, we must work with the international community to set grounds for practical preparations in listing the area as a cultural and natural World Heritage Site.
But the North has shown little to no sign of coming on board, rejecting Seoul's proposal of establishing ecological parks in the past. As inter-Korean cooperation is necessary for the next chapter of the DMZ's life, its fate will depend on how denuclearization talks and sanctions relief unfold. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
President Moon, while making the peace zone proposal, called for the international community's cooperation in removing landmines from the DMZ. Our Kim Ji-yeon now tells us the efforts South Korea is making to clear DMZ of landmines and the significance landmine removal operation holds for inter-Korean relations.
The removal of mines from the demilitarized zone is one of the most obvious operations that symbolizes the improvement in inter-Korean relations because it almost always requires the consent of both Koreas. The demining operations are necessary to carry out various other inter-Korean projects agreed to by the two Koreas, including the joint removal of DMZ guard posts, the excavation of Korean War remains, and joint research of cultural heritages along the border. The South Korean military conducted mine removal operations from 2000 to 2005 for the test run of two cross-border railways, a project that finally became a reality at a groundbreaking ceremony last December. According to data from South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the military removed some 1,700 mines over an area of 850,000 square meters near the path of North Korea's Gyeonggi Railway line. It then destroyed around 250 mines planted in the 130,000 square meters of land near the Donghae Railway line. The South Korean military has also removed mines at Arrowhead Ridge for the excavation of Korean War remains, following the signing of the Inter-Korean Comprehensive Military Agreement last September. Through its demining experiences, the South Korean military says their clearance is not an easy task, as it demands a lot of manual labor. Locating them in the first place also presents a daunting task. Maps indicating where the mines were initially placed become useless over time as their accuracy drops, since the mines often shift due to erosion following floods, heavy rain, and landslides. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Also mentioned during President Moon's UN speech were free trade and the need for countries to reflect on their past. He didn't name names, but these were clearly references to Japan's trade restrictions against Korea and the Japanese government's unwillingness to take responsibility for its wrongdoings. Our Park Hee-jun has more.
On the world's biggest diplomatic stage, President Moon Jae-in did not miss the opportunity to criticize Japan for refusing to compensate South Koreans pushed into forced labor during Japan's colonial rule of Korea and for Tokyo's recent retaliatory trade measures.
과거에 대한 진지한 성찰 위에 자유롭고 공정한 무역의 가치를 굳게 지키며 협력할 때 우리는 더욱 발전해 나갈 수 있을 것입니다.
It was an indirect but clear message to Japan. President Moon emphasized the importance of maintaining a free trade order, something Japan has been failing to do.
동아시아는 2차 세계대전이 끝난 후 침략과 식민 지배의 아픔을 딛고 상호 긴밀히 교류하며 경제적인 분업과 협업을 통해 세계사에 유례없는 발전을 이뤄왔습니다. 자유무역의 공정한 경쟁 질서가 그 기반이 되었습니다.
The General Assembly speech was the first multilateral stage for President Moon since the Japanese government initiated its export curbs on South Korea's high-tech materials in July, and since it took Seoul off its whitelist of trusted trading partners in August. However, President Moon is seen to have refrained from stronger remarks that could have irritated Japan. But he shed light on how this whole Tokyo trade dispute is not simply a bilateral issue, but one that hurts the global trade order. According to the South Korean president, Seoul considers its neighbors as partners. And based on the regional partnership, South Korea strives to expand a people-centered community of mutual prosperity throughout the Korean Peninsula, East Asia, and ultimately to the whole of Asia. Through this message, a conciliatory gesture to Japan, President Moon once again called on Tokyo to work with Seoul to resolve their differences in a diplomatic manner. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump touched on North Korea's denuclearization during his third speech at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, but he put significantly less emphasis on the matter compared to previous years, raising questions on whether he has lost interest. Our EG1 reports.
President Trump's message to North Korea at the 2019 UN General Assembly was short and simple.
And we have pursued bold diplomacy on the Korean Peninsula. I have told Kim Jong-un what I truly believe, that like Iran, his country is full of tremendous untapped potential, but that to realize that promise, North Korea must denuclearize.
With those remarks, President Trump also said the U.S. is ready to embrace friendship with those who seek peace and respect. He added that his country's goal is to create lasting harmony, and then moved on to the next topic. Now, this remarkably short message came in the middle of a speech over 36 minutes long. He was speaking in a different context than last year, when he addressed the General Assembly just 3 months after his historic Singapore summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So last year, he devoted more time to it. He mentioned his promise with Kim, thanked Kim for his courage, noted some achievements already made, and also warned that sanctions will remain in place. North Korea that time came up at the 5th minute of a 35-minute address and took up 2 whole minutes of it. Trump's speech was longer this year, but North Korea got only 1 minute. Also, it was brought up halfway through with one simple message that North Korea has to denuclearize to realize its economic potential. Some say this might be caution on Trump's part ahead of working-level talks with the North, but many say it could mean Trump's losing interest in the issue.
There have been reports that North Korea isn't going to give up its nuclear weapons. And I think Trump has also realized that the issue isn't as simple as he thought it'd be. It's become harder to bring this out as a successful part of his foreign policy, and so the issue has been pushed to the side. Less effort is going to go into the talks, and instead the U.S. will just try to manage the situation.
The expert added that at the upcoming working-level talks, the U.S. might discuss partially easing sanctions on the North for freezing its nuclear activities, which could be the new method Trump has hinted at. But unless significant progress is made, the expert said the Trump administration is not likely to bring up its hopes for North Korea's complete denuclearization. 이지원, Arirang News.
The top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the US and Japan met Tuesday in New York and reaffirmed their three-way cooperation on North Korean nuclear issues. That's Seoul's chief nuclear negotiator Lee Do-hun and his US and Japanese counterparts Stephen Biegun and Shigeki Takizaki. This was their first trilateral since Takizaki was appointed nuclear envoy earlier this month. Earlier on the same day, the national security advisors of South Korea and the US also met on the same issue. Seoul and Washington have agreed to continue negotiations on next year's costs to station US troops in South Korea. The agreement came after two-day talks in Seoul. South Korea's foreign ministry said officials from both sides hope to reach a deal that reflects a reasonable and fair sharing of defense costs. It also said the talks were conducted with the aim of strengthening the two countries' alliance, adding that the two sides exchanged their views thoroughly. They agreed to hold the next round of discussions in the US sometime next month. Seoul is currently paying $870 million, an 8.2% increase from last year. The trade war between Korea and Japan continues, but they're looking for a resolution. This week, more than 300 business leaders and experts from the two countries gathered in Seoul and agreed to expand business exchanges and cooperation. Our Ji-young has more.
The 51st Korea-Japan Business Conference wrapped up its two-day annual event on Wednesday. Despite frosty diplomatic ties between the two countries over Tokyo's export curbs on Seoul, efforts are still being made to improve their relations on the business front. Business leaders of the two nations agreed that restoration of diplomatic ties is an important step to achieve improved business relations between Seoul and Tokyo. The annual event concluded with the release of a formal joint statement and a press briefing where representatives from both countries exchanged their views on pending bilateral issues. Business reps from both countries agreed on multiple topics, including working together on common challenges ranging from talent development to employment issues. The two sides also agreed to expand economic, talent, and cultural exchanges. The two parties also agreed to cooperate on the upcoming Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. This year's meeting was originally scheduled to take place in May, but was delayed amid souring bilateral relations due to a trade dispute sparked by Tokyo's export curbs on Seoul. One of the participants said that although the event was postponed, he was glad that it was held this year.
Many firms in Korea and Japan have an important role in forming global supply chains. Cooperation between those companies will be very beneficial not only for the economies of Seoul and Tokyo, but also for the global economy.
Another businessman from Japan said he has been attending this conference for 30 years.
I think businessmen in both countries are responsible for restoring Korea-Japan ties through improving business relations.
Experts say this annual gathering of business leaders could take on greater significance as they can serve as a catalyst to ease bilateral tensions. Ji-young, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea faces 3 more suspected cases of African swine fever, with 5 confirmed cases already. Fears are rising within the country that the disease may spread southward. Our Kim Jae has the latest.
5 cases had already been confirmed when on Wednesday the Agriculture Ministry reported 3 more suspected cases. In the morning, it announced a case in Gwangha County, Incheon. Then, in the hours to come, there was another in Gwangha and 1 more in Yeoncheon, Gyeonggi-do Province. If the 3 new cases are all confirmed, they'll bring the total confirmed cases of African swine fever to 8. The ministry says it plans to inspect pig farms and livestock-related facilities in 154 cities and counties as it prepares to disinfect them. A 48-hour nationwide standstill has been in place since 12 p.m. Tuesday for all pig farms, feed factories, and slaughterhouses. The entire province of Gyeonggi-do is now under quarantine as the city of Incheon and Gangwon-do Province. Gyeonggi-do also said on Wednesday it will cull almost 40,000 pigs near a farm in Paju, where a case is already confirmed. They'll bring the total number of pigs put down across the country to more than 50,000. The Blue House has also launched a separate task force that will get the latest information from agencies and come up with swift response measures. African swine fever is harmless to humans but fatal to pigs, so its spread could severely damage pork supplies across the country. It's not clear how the disease got into South Korea, but it appeared in North Korea back in May, so the authorities are inspecting inter-Korean waterways. According to South Korea's National Intelligence Service, the pig population of North Korea's Pyeongan-buk-do province has been wiped out. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
U.S. Democrats have launched a formal impeachment inquiry into President Trump following allegations he pressured his Ukrainian counterpart to damage his political rival, Joe Biden. The move makes Trump the 4th American president to face impeachment proceedings. Choi Si-young has the details.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced impeachment inquiry Tuesday local time, claiming Trump had violated the Constitution.
The actions of the Trump presidency revealed the dishonorable fact of the president's betrayal of his oath of office, betrayal of our national security, and betrayal of the integrity of our elections.
An anonymous whistleblower claims Trump pressured Ukraine's new leader to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter at a time when Ukraine was desperate for U.S. military aid. Trump, meanwhile, on Twitter called the impeachment announcement a total witch hunt, insisting Democrats haven't even seen the transcript of the phone call the inquiry is based on. On Wednesday, he is set to release what he says is the complete, fully declassified and unredacted transcript with Ukraine's president. Meanwhile, in a debate Tuesday, 2 of the 3 Republicans challenging Trump for the presidential nomination supported the impeachment inquiry. Candidate Joe Walsh went on to say Trump is unfit and deserves to be impeached soon. But experts say impeachment is still unlikely since Republicans who control the Senate are still on Trump's side, and any impeachment resolution would have to be approved by them.
It might have a lot of symbolic meanings, but it probably won't have anything concrete to do with the economy or the stock markets.
Only 3 American leaders before Trump have faced impeachment proceedings, but Congress has never convicted and removed one from the White House. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
So the formal impeachment inquiry into President Trump opens another politically tumultuous phase in Washington. In South Korea, meanwhile, famous journalist and Trump critic Bob Woodward and commentator David Urban, who supports Trump, went head-to-head on the future of the U.S. leader. Kan Young-woo has the highlights.
Okay, why does my newspaper calculate 12,000 lies or untruths that the president has said, and that the president's first lawyer in the Mueller investigation, John Dowd, concluded that the tragic flaw of Donald Trump is that he's, quote, an effing liar.
The president in his book has stated on numerous occasions that he is prone to truthful hyperbole. okay? He's a real estate developer. So when he says, I'm building the biggest, best building in the world, your paper says that's a lie. That wasn't the biggest, best building in the world. That building's not that big and it's not that great.
Although Woodward and Urban have two very different views of the U.S. leader, they agreed that nothing's been proven by the Trump investigation so far. They said we should wait and see what kind of facts and evidence come up. Now, for next year's presidential election in the U.S., Woodward had a word of advice for the politicians taking part in TV debates.
And I think they need to address some of the large questions like, what's the job of the president? How does a president doesn't sit around spending 10 hours and come up with a health insurance bill? What a president does, and I think David would agree with this, the president is a talent scout. You've got to find people who will do the job, do the work.
2020 looks like 2016. Very difficult. If you look at the numbers, over 120 million votes were cast in the United States of America. Donald Trump lost the popular vote by roughly 3 million votes, but he won 3 important states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, by roughly 75,000 votes. 75,000 out of 120 million. I suspect that this election will come down to roughly 100,000 votes as well.
As for the Democratic side, Woodward said 14 months before the election in 1992, nobody had Bill Clinton on the top 50 list of nominees, but Clinton did get the nod and went on to win the presidency. Kang-Young-woo, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has reiterated Seoul's determination to form a joint team with North Korea for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and to co-host the Summer Games in 2032. In a meeting with International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach in New York, President Moon shared his administration's efforts to further the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. Bach praised Moon's efforts to expand peace through the Olympics, starting with the 2018 Winter Games in Pyeongchang. Bach said he hopes those efforts will also lead to the success of the Tokyo Olympics and the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, and that cooperation between Korea, China, and Japan can help establish peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia. The Seoul metropolitan government put on an expo for cultural centers around the country, showcasing traditional dance performances and various other stages that represent Korea's unique regional cultures. Our Kim Bo-kyung was there.
25 cultural centers from Seoul and 22 centers from around the country gathered at Gwanghwamun Square on Wednesday to promote local folk cultures and traditional performances as part of the 2019 Seoul Cultural Center Expo. Dongnaegu Cultural Center from the port city Busan displayed its Dongnae crane dance. The dance portrays the elegant movements of the cranes that inhabit the area. Gohung Cultural Center from Jeollanam-do Province showed off its paper money dance. Recorded as one of Korean intangible cultural assets, this dance is usually seen in Korea's southwestern Honam region. Shamans in the region would dance with dozens of pieces of paper while praying for the dead to rest in peace. And a team from Suncheong, Jeollabuk-do Province, performed the marching song Okcheon Village Daechita.
Okcheon Village Daechita uses Korean wind and string instruments, and this marching song usually led the King's Parade in the past. The audience could find it meaningful to see how the old custom of the Goryeo dynasty is reproduced.
There were also plenty of activities for visitors to get involved in, such as making lucky bags used on Seollal, the Lunar New Year, or making shoes out of hanji, a type of traditional Korean paper. There was also a center where calligraphers write quotations of people who fought for Korean independence. As well as attracting locals, the festival gave foreigners a chance to see less well-publicized aspects of traditional Korean culture.
It's interesting because all of these shamanistic rituals and shamanistic culture, which you do not find in Asian countries anymore today. And as a Western guy, I do not even know that it exists or existed.
People could also take part in traditional Korean folk games or playing a traditional Korean drum.
These performances give people a taste of different cultural traditions of each corner of the country and will perhaps inspire them to take a trip and explore new parts of Korea. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The UK Supreme Court has ruled that Prime Minister Boris Johnson's suspension of Parliament in the run-up to Brexit was unlawful. Johnson, who is flying back early from a UN summit in New York, said he strongly disagrees with the ruling but would respect it. The PM is also rejecting opposition calls for his resignation. MPs are expected to return to Parliament on Wednesday local time. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi says South Korea and Russia are working to sign a free trade agreement in services and investment by next year. On a visit to Moscow Tuesday local time, Hong said such an FTA would not only help lower tariffs, but also speed up customs procedures. Both nations started talks on services and investment last June. Their bilateral trade last year amounted to around $25 billion. South Korean airports have seen a fall in the number of people traveling to and from Japan. According to the Korea Airports Corporation, 7 local airports saw a 34% decline in passengers on Japan flights in the last week of August compared to the first week of July. There were only 100,000 in the last week of August. The number of flights were also cut by 19%. A nationwide boycott of Japanese products and services has led to the fall in travel to Japan. South Korea's Seoul aircraft maker says its unmanned helicopter, developed using its own technology, has successfully completed its maiden flight. Korea Aerospace Industries said the NI-600VT completed its test flight at a space center in the southern coastal town of Kohung. The unmanned model is based on a Rotoway A600 twin-seat helicopter and is said to be capable of automatically returning to its base even in emergency situations.
It's hot during the day and chilly in the morning and night, and we're seeing a gap of about 10 degrees between the highs and lows.
Certainly a wide gap. For more details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Now, the air is quite different when the sun goes down. During the day, the temperature rises rapidly with the autumn sunshine, but it cools down very quickly soon after sunset. So make sure to have an extra layer to wear to stay warm. And as the heat continues to linger, the leaves will start to change color a little later than usual. The first autumn leaves of the season can be seen on Seoraksan Mountain this weekend, and the changes in the foliage will gradually be seen in the regions further south. And the best time to see the autumn leaves will be in about 2 weeks, when around 80% of the leaves have changed color. And now the nation will begin Thursday under cloudy skies, and the morning will be slightly warmer in Seoul, Gwangju, and also for Daegu, which starts the day at 17 degrees Celsius, and Busan to 20, while Jeju begins the day at 21 degrees. Now Jeju will start to see rain in the afternoon with a daily high of 26 degrees, while Seoul seems to be on the hotter side, rising up to 28 degrees tomorrow. Now I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Okay, that will wrap it up for today's Arirang News Center. Thank you, as always, for watching.
Keep it tuned to Arirang for news in depth, coming up in just a few minutes.